The death of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada marked the end of an era for one of the most successful new religious movements to reach the Western Hemisphere in the 20th century. The Hare Krishna movement succeeded because of an encounter and an exchange between spiritual explorers that occurred at just the right place and time between Prabhupada and the American countercultural movement of the 1960s. Prabhupada was a religious leader with an unlikely background, a chemist from India who began a second career as a guru, trying to bring India back to its spiritual roots. As he explored his own religious tradition of Krishna consciousness, he was called to spread the Hare Krishna mantra to the West. Near the end of his life, he traveled to the United States, where he encountered a generation of explorers who were searching for new truths. The exchange between Prabhupada's teachings and his followers' enthusiasm and devotion created a new global religious movement, the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, commonly called the Hare Krishnas. Prabhupada died only 12 years after he arrived in the United States, but he had finished his mission, successfully spreading the Hare Krishna mantra around the globe. Hare Krishna is a subgroup of the ancient Indian religion Hinduism. In the early 16th century CE, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started the Krishna Bhakti movement, the predecessor of modern Krishna consciousness. His reform movement within Hinduism had distinct characteristics: a personal monotheistic concept of Krishna, the supreme embodiment of the Godhead, and the rejection of the exclusive hierarchical caste system. Chaitanya preached that all people, regardless of caste or station in life, could be self-realized through the practice of bhakti yoga, love and service to God, which included Sankirtana, the practice of singing and dancing praises of Lord Krishna in the streets, and most importantly, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, which Chaitanya predicted would one day be heard in every town and village. ISKCON's future founder, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, was born in 1896 in Calcutta with the name Abhay Charande. He was raised with a strict Krishna consciousness lifestyle. He graduated from the University of Calcutta and was then employed as a manager in a chemical firm until his retirement. In his early years, he supported Mahatma Gandhi, but his political life quickly ended in 1922 after he met his spiritual guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, who traced his guru lineage back to Chaitanya, who in turn traced his lineage back to Krishna. When Prabhupada officially took initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta in 1933, his guru told him that it was his mission to take Krishna consciousness to the West. He also told him before he died in 1936 that if he ever got money, to print books. In 1944, in his memory, Prabhupada began single-handedly publishing the Krishna consciousness newspaper Back to Godhead. In 1955, at the age of 59, Prabhupada took the order of sannyasa, retiring from family life and becoming a monk. He then began to focus his energies on translating important Hindu writings into English, a preoccupation that would continue the rest of his life. Prabhupada began to realize that Indians had little interest in spiritual life. He also noticed that they were imitators of all things American. Prabhupada realized that by bringing Krishna consciousness to the West, he could potentially revive it in India. At the age of 69, he at last followed his guru's request from 40 years before and made plans to travel to the United States. After finding sponsors to provide for travel and lodging, Prabhupada boarded the freighter ship, the Jaladuta, on August 12, 1965, taking only a small suitcase, writing supplies, an umbrella, and a bag of dry cereal. The journey took 38 days to New York. In his diary, he recorded suffering what he believed to be 2 massive heart attacks. He wrote that he had passed over a great struggle of life and death. Upon his arrival, Prabhupada wondered if Americans, with their material wealth, would be able to receive his message. What Prabhupada did not realize was that he was about to encounter America's countercultural movement of the 60s that was ready to embrace Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada soon found himself in the hub of the countercultural movement, the Lower East Side of New York. Sparked by the Vietnam War and other events, many young people were turning away from American values and ways of life. These young people, who were labeled hippies, explored new forms of fulfillment. Some sought higher levels of consciousness in drugs, or spirituality, or both. Many of these youth ended up finding fulfillment in the downtown Swami Prabhupada. Michael Grant, later known as Mukunda Goswami, a young musician, was drawn to Prabhupada's warm personality. After Prabhupada officially founded the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON, in 1966, Mukunda helped Prabhupada find a small storefront in the Lower East Side that they converted into a temple. This began attracting many people, including famous beat poet Allen Ginsberg.
Traditionally, Swami's yogis and masters all moved uptown to the rich. And here was Bhaktivedanta, like in the depths of Calcutta, where the hippies were.
The characteristics that made Krishna consciousness different from mainstream Hinduism helped it catch on in the West. The energetic chanting and other forms of kirtan, such as handing out books, drew people to the religion, and the concept of a monotheistic personal God was familiar to many people. Some felt that Krishna consciousness was not a way of losing their old faith. They had only encountered a new interpretation in a larger context.
The thing is that the different religions just have different cultural ways to pursue their religious tradition, but the essence is the same. The intention is the same in all religions. The intention is to develop your love for God.
When someone became initiated into ISKCON, they had to give up illicit sex, drugs, meat, and gambling. While many hippies thought that higher spiritual consciousness and drugs went hand in hand, many soon realized that Krishna consciousness was a way of staying high forever.
What do you think of my taking LSD for my spiritual realization, expanded consciousness? I was interested in staying high forever, as it were. He says, that's not necessary. He said, your spiritual life is already here. He said, you don't need to take anything for your spiritual life. And I knew he was right.
Within months, Mukunda departed New York to star in ISKCON Temple, New Jagannath Puri, in Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco. There, the movement took off, with a mantra rock dance headlined by the Grateful Dead, and hundreds of seekers hearing Prabhupada preach on Hippie Hill and attending the first Rath Yatra celebration. Temple President Jayananda Das gave his life savings to publish Prabhupada's book, The Bhagavad Gita as It Is. Prabhupada referred to his new followers as his dancing white elephants. Though the temple was thriving, Prabhupada became increasingly interested in bringing the mantra to London.
So we went to London that fall. Somehow or another, by the enthusiasm that Srila Prabhupada had given us in Montreal, we were able to make contact with George Harrison, who was a member of the Beatles at the time. He so much appreciated the Hare Krishna mantra that he immediately said, let's make a 45 record. So we'd cut a record, and Apple organized tours for us, and we were able to send the report back to Srila Prabhupada with the headlines, Krishna Consciousness Startles London.
In the next 2 decades, ISKCON would spread like wildfire across Europe, even to the Soviet Union, where many devotees would face persecution. The stage was finally set for Prabhupada and his devotees to bring his movement back to India in 1970. The arrival of Prabhupada and his dancing white elephants, whom the Indians observed to be rich, educated white men, brought renewed zeal to the religion. Prabhupada initiated thousands of devotees. A temple was built in Krishna's home, Vrindavan. Meanwhile, in Moundsville, West Virginia, devotees were building New Vrindavan as a place of pilgrimage for American disciples. After Prabhupada's death in 1977, ISKCON faced many challenges, including criticism from outsiders and leadership failure within. However, the movement endured and thrived. This year marks the 50th anniversary of ISKCON. Now many of the followers are less likely to live on a commune and wear robes. However, they are still humble devotees of Krishna. What began as one man exploring his own faith led to an exchange of ideas between Indian traditions and the American counterculture, which led to millions encountering the religion around the globe. In the end, the prediction rang true. The Hare Krishna mantra was heard in every town and village.